What is up, bosses? Before we start this episode, I want to tell you about our sponsor this week. It is Indeed.com. You've heard me say it before, and you already know Indeed is the hiring partner where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. So when you're ready to make the leap and turn your passion into profit, you need the right team to make it happen. Indeed makes it easy to hire and build a team with the right skills to make your dream a reality. And Indeed is the only job site where you're guaranteed to find quality applications that meet your must-have requirements, or else you don't pay. So instead of spending hours on multiple job sites hoping to find candidates with the right skills, you need one powerful hiring partner that can help you do it all, and that is Indeed. I'm going to tell you all about Indeed and their awesome features during the break in the show, but if you want to check them out right now, you can head over to Indeed.com/ILAB to get your $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post now through March 31st. All you got to do is head to Indeed.com/ILAB to claim your $75 credit before March 31st. That's Indeed.com/ILAB. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Okay, let's kick off this episode.
Welcome to the Invest Like a Boss podcast.
I'm Sam Marks.
And I'm Johnny FD. We're self-made entrepreneurs who invest our own money and use modern technology to invest like a boss.
Join us each week for exclusive interviews with our network of modern investors, business owners, and multimillionaires to discover new ways to invest our hard-earned cash.
What's up, bosses? Welcome to another episode of Invest Like a Boss. This is episode 222. I'm Derek Sparts here in Los Angeles. I'm getting really bored of saying I'm in LA every week because you guys are always in a different spot. Johnny, you're on the move again. What's up, man? Where are you at?
Well, last night I just got into Greece, into the ancient capital city of the old empire here in Athens.
So why Greece?
I stupidly assumed it wasn't part of the Schengen zone, and I was running out of days in the EU. So I decided to book a cheap flight. It was $35 from Budapest to Greece. And I got here and I realized, oh, we're still in the EU. So my clock is still ticking.
So correct me if I'm wrong. You had some type of residency in Ukraine that you had established, because I know you just got the card when I was there. Mm-hmm. And I think that allows you some kind of extension in the EU, no? No,
because Ukraine is not part of the EU. So I can stay in Ukraine for, like an infinite amount of time, or at least the next 3 years. But I can't stay in the EU for more than 90 days.
I thought they changed it with the whole situation going on. I don't know if you heard anything about that. I thought I heard something about that.
So for Ukrainian citizens, 100%, but for residents, I don't think it applies to us, but I need to double check as well.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. So if you are running out of days in the EU, and Athens is part of the EU and not in the Schengen zone, where to tomorrow, I guess?
I don't know, but I'll be here for the next 3 weeks. And I actually just posted the Patreon. Basically, we've talked about this for a long time, where we want to do more in-person meetups, just even casual meetups for like coffee or dinner. So I decided, you know what, every time I'm in a new city, I'm just going to post it and say, anyone who wants to meet up for lunch or dinner, here's the info. So it's in the Patreon group for anyone who's all access or higher. So the $10 a month or higher plans.
That's a good call. And I've been slacking on that as well. I know we got a lot of bosses in LA, or at least a greater California area. And I'm going to do one of those as well, too. It's always good to meet awesome bosses out there.
Yeah. Especially our Patreon supporters, because you guys are the reason, we're able to produce the show. So it's kind of like a thank you, like a private club.
Definitely. Let's talk about this episode. So we've been trying to focus more, speaking on, making sure that, our bosses and our Patreons are giving you the best that we can. More of these 101 episodes. I think it's good to kind of get back to basics and remind us, I guess, why the podcast was started. So a lot of this was, exploring investing, becoming financially independent. And not that we've strayed away from that. It's just that we've been focusing on other things, multiple platforms, all kinds of different investments. It's good to get back to the basics every once in a while, though. So this week, we're going to talk about emergency funds, which is obviously a very top of mind subject for Johnny in his current situation.
Yeah, honestly, it saved my butt because, 2-3 million Ukrainians have fled now, and most of them didn't have emergency fund. I mean, a lot of them just didn't have very high salaries in the first place. But even the people who did, they didn't really save that much money. I would say, the vast majority of people have enough to last them maybe a few weeks, and then they have to get a job right away or they're screwed. Some of them, cross the border, with just whatever cash they had. And unfortunately, nobody takes hryvnia outside of Ukraine. You can't even change it in Ukraine anymore because the bank's closed. Luckily, online transactions still work, but you're pretty much screwed if you didn't have a solid backup plan. And I think what I've learned by putting my emergency fund into place is how important it is for everyone, regardless of where you live. Most Americans, don't have a savings account, right? Like, Derek, you brought up I think you mentioned a cool statistic that you found about Americans.
Yeah. So you mentioned, most Ukrainians didn't have enough to cover an emergency. You'd think, though, America, the wealthiest nation in the world, that pretty much everybody would be pretty safe if they had an emergency. Johnny, guess the percentage of Americans that if they had a $400 emergency come up today, what percentage of Americans could actually cover that with the money in their account?
I mean, you would think 99%, would be able to cover that. It doesn't seem like that big of a deal.
Only 36% of Americans say that they have enough in their bank account to cover a $400 emergency. 1/3 of people can only cover a $400 emergency. How wild is that?
That's insane. And actually, I'm not surprised because I remember in 2008 or 2013. I remember now. I was running out of money. I was living in Thailand, and I thought, you know what? I should probably move back to the US and get a job. But I want to give this lifestyle another shot. So I was writing the ebook, and I was like, I got 2 months to finish this. If this works, I can stay in Thailand. If it doesn't, I need to go home. But the problem is I didn't have enough money to even buy a plane ticket. I was like, I can either, use this last $800 to live in Thailand for the next 2 months and just kind of stretch it out, or I can, buy a plane ticket home. And I thought, I think this will work. Like, let me give this a shot. So I called the richest guy I knew, like the only person in my family, the only friend I knew at the time that made over 6 figures. It was my cousin. And I said, Larry, like, just in case, like if I need to borrow, $800 from you or $1,000 from you, like, I'll pay you back, once I get back to the US, I get a job. Like, is that okay? And he said, yeah, of course. No problem. You're my cousin. I trust you, but give me 1 or 2 months, notice so I can get the money. And I said, what? You make $100,000 a year. And this was, 10 years ago, it'd be like someone making $200,000, a year now. And I was like, you don't just have $1,000. Like, how is that possible?
So crazy, but I see how it happens. I mean, I was in that position myself. I had a really good job and I felt like I was doing well, but I was spending more than I was making. And it's so easy to do, especially in America, I think. Easy credit. It's all about keeping up with everybody. And especially like where I live in Los Angeles, everybody drives a Mercedes, a BMW, and they're working at a coffee shop. It's like, what are you doing? It's a lot of image and a lot of that stuff. It's not necessarily exclusive to America, but there's a lot of pressure to kind of show off what you have, even if you don't have it here.
Yeah. It's crazy. And it sucks. So the first kind of big calculation that every single person needs to do is we need to figure out how much we actually need to have an emergency fund, because we all know that even though we don't think it's going to happen to us, that you never know. I mean, regardless if you live in the US or Ukraine or in Europe or Australia, like the world is changing and things happen, right? So every single source recommends a 3 to 6 month emergency fund. I think rationally, the longer the better, right? Some people even say 1 to 2 years, because really, if things really go bad, like let's say we hit a big recession, it might last 2 years. But let's use 6 months for now, because I think that's kind of a little bit more realistic for everyone.
Totally. And I think one kind of point on this too we should mention is really calculate what your actual monthly expenses are. I think a lot of people just think, oh, I have a a house payment or rent, and I have a car payment, and maybe I spend $200 a week on food or whatever it may be. But actually, I would say go back, look at your bank statements, any credit cards you're using. You're probably spending a lot more than you think. I think a lot of people in their head think they spend less than they actually do. Go back and look at every account you have and see how much you actually spend. And then you can get more accurate picture of what 3 to 6 months or longer looks like.
Yeah. And I would say most people in the US are probably spending, $3,000 a month. They're spending half of that
at least.
Yeah. On rent, maybe the other half on just even eating out. The nice thing about emergency fund is you don't technically have to count these kind of extras, like things like going to restaurants, but you do need to account for basics like your rent, your utility bills, your insurance, anything that's a fixed cost. And things like groceries, right? Because you have to eat still. I mean, you can stop dining out, but you still have to eat. So I would say for the average, person who's spending, whatever, $1,500 a month on rent, maybe $200 in bills, maybe a $300 car payment, maybe $300 in groceries. That's at least $2,000 a month, if not $3,000.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And if you calculate that times, let's say 2,000 times 6, that's 12,000 bucks. Yeah. And that's kind of the minimum. So if you have a family, and your expenses aren't $2,000 a month or $4,000 a month, you have to double that. So $24,000. How many Americans do you think have that, or how many people in the world do you think have that in savings or an emergency fund?
I'm honestly going to say 24,000 ready at hand is going to be less than 10%.
I would think it's less than like 3%.
Really?
I think, yeah.
You might be right. Yeah.
Yeah. I think everyone should have it, especially if you have a decent job or you're making pretty good money. This should be a non-negotiable. Every single person should have $24,000, as a goal to have in savings, because it's, it really can determine your life. If you become homeless, if you end up losing everything or needing to sell your assets at a loss, which is something we'll get into in a second. But, having this buffer really can change your life.
So let's talk about where to keep the money. So you're saying in savings. Should I have the whole thing in savings, or is there other places that would be considered, I guess, liquid enough to be your emergency fund?
Yeah, so you used a very good keyword, liquid. Like this emergency fund needs to be liquid. And what that means is you need to be able to access it within 3 to 5 days. Ideally, you should be able to access a significant portion of it the same day. So if you have it in something like stocks or real estate, it depends on what it is. So for example, real estate is definitely not liquid, because even if you wanted to sell your house, it could take 3 to 6 months minimum. That's not something you can count on for for liquidity. Stocks are nice because they're relatively liquid. You can sell them, and get them get the cash within 72 hours normally, but they're volatile. Mm-hmm. So if it's not a personal emergency, it's like another big recession or a depression or something like a big world event like a war, everything's going to be crashing. And do you really want to be selling your stocks or your holdings when everything's 50% down? So that's why it's really important just to have the money in a savings account. And I would recommend having it in a completely separate savings account, maybe even at a different bank. And that way, not all your money is in one bank, because you never know, you might get locked out of it. The bank might fail, might freeze. So I would recommend, having an auto transfer to a completely separate bank that you just never log in. I mean, I guess you could check the balance once a month if you really want, but set up the amount that you can save, whether it's $500 a month or, $1,000 a month, or, even $200 a month, whatever your goal is, and have that just auto deposit into a completely separate savings account or a checkings account. That's just cash. Whether it's earning you money or not, it's really, really important. And that auto transfer is key, because if you wait until the end of the month to try to save what's left over, it's probably not going to happen.
What do you think about this, Johnny? I read this the other day too. It said to where to hold your emergency fund, that, like you said, put it in a different bank than your regular bank. And it also added on to that. It said, go to open an account with an online bank. And then that way you actually won't be tempted to walk into the bank and empty that account. What do you think about that? Where it's like, if it's online, then you don't drive by it every single day, or you don't have an ATM you can access to get it.
I think it's a good idea not to have the ATM card. Even definitely don't have it on you. I guess you could have it, somewhere it's kind of in a safe spot. I don't think it really matters. I mean, I'm not driving by B of A thinking, oh, I should just walk in there. Like it'd be just easy. I'd be surprised.
Yeah. Some people might.
I think it's just easy to log into like shop.com or something and transfer the money. But what I do recommend for anyone who isn't living in the US is don't have all your money in one currency. I mean, the US dollar is a bit lucky and special because we're the reserve currency. So, as much as the US basically fucks up all the time, we still end up being a stable currency. But if you live in China and you have the yuan, if you live in, Russia and you have the rubles, or the Ukraine, you have the hryvnia. But even if you have, euro or British pounds, Swiss francs, whatever it is, I would recommend having at least a portion of your money in a reserve currency, whether it's, US dollar or euros or something like that.
Yeah. And actually it's not all my emergency fund, but a little chunk, and it kind of varies because it's really rare that I have cash now, but when I do, I tend to hoard it. So I want it on me, and I have a little stash of cash locked away at home. What do you think about actually holding some physical cash as well? Obviously you said the US dollar. Is that something, you said you should hold some of the US dollar. Would you hold that in actual cash, or would you have it in an account somewhere?
I think it's a good idea to have a little bit of cash, but I'm saying like $500 to $1,000, just to kind of get away fund. That's fine. But I think it's a terrible idea to have all your money in cash, especially at home under a mattress or something, because it's easy to lose. It's easy to get, catch on fire. It's easy to get stolen. It's definitely losing money because it's not getting any interest at all. It's a liability, and unfortunately a lot of, Ukrainians had their money in cash, and who knows what happened to it? It might have been burned up, and luckily a lot of them had money in US dollars because they understood that it's a lot more stable. But in general, I try not to deal with cash. In this digital world, it's so much easier to have money online in different accounts. I probably have maybe 4 different accounts where I spend my money out. So even if one or two of them, messes up or I get locked out of it, and this has happened before, especially if you're traveling or moving countries, it really can happen. So yeah, have a little bit of money in actual cash just in case, but the rest of it have online in different accounts.
Really good points. We're going to get deeper into, specifically your situation in Ukraine and how emergency funds really apply to that situation. And also I want to talk about crypto, because if this current situation has taught us anything, maybe a really big use case for cryptocurrencies, especially Bitcoin. We're going to take a really quick break, hear from our sponsor, and we'll be back in 1 minute to talk about that. This week's episode of Invest Like a Boss is brought to you by Indeed.com. Now, I teased it earlier in the show. I want to tell you about some of the awesome features that you can only find on Indeed. Indeed. First up, they have Instant Match. This is where over 90% of employers get quality candidates as soon as they sponsor a job post, according to Indeed data. Candidates you invite to apply through Instant Match are 3 times more likely to apply to your job than candidates who only see it in a search. Next up, Indeed also has assessments. These help star applicants shine with over 135 different assessment tests, anywhere from cooking to coding. Indeed helps you see your top talent's abilities faster. And finally, you can do virtual interviews right inside Indeed. It saves you time. You can message, schedule, and interview top talent seamlessly, all in one place. Indeed makes it so easy to connect with your applicants. No need to install anything extra. It works right from your browser and saves you a ton of headaches. So if you want to get on the path to hiring your dream candidate faster, we're going to help you out. Just head over to Indeed.com/ILAB. That's Indeed.com/ILAB. If you go there, we'll hook you up with a $75 sponsored job credit. That's Indeed.com/ILAB. Terms and conditions apply. Offer expires March 31st. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right, back here on Invest Like a Boss. Johnny, I want to bring up something that kind of made me rethink how to spread out my emergency fund. Considering the situation in Ukraine, I'm taken back to, I guess, about 2 weeks ago. Ukraine wasn't able to access any funds, or they wanted to raise some funds, and a lot of people were having problems donating. And they actually set up a link to donate Bitcoin to them. And I think within like 2 or 3 days, they raised like $40-some million in Bitcoin. And I can't think of any other situation where someone really needed to raise cash and they couldn't get access to currencies. And this is where the use case for cryptocurrency really showed its effectiveness as a tool. I don't know what you thought about that, and if it kind of made you think maybe I should be holding more Bitcoin in emergencies like this.
Yeah, actually, so that situation, it wasn't that they were locked out of their banks. It was just that a lot of people didn't understand, especially Americans don't understand how to transfer money using the SWIFT system. Russia's locked out of SWIFT, but Ukraine's not. So that is one kind of use case is, for people in Russia, if they needed money, it'd be much easier to get Bitcoin than it would be to get bank transfer because that the SWIFT system is shut down. The American equivalent of, we don't really use SWIFT. I think what do we use? There's we use just like a routing number or something, or like a wire transfer number. Yeah, ACH transfer. That's what we use. But basically, it was a weekend and banks were closed, and a lot of people just didn't know how to SWIFT. So I think one of the ministers in Ukraine set up an Ether and a Bitcoin account for donations. That helped a lot, especially because, a lot of people were just sitting on, Ether and Bitcoin and thought, what, this isn't real money anyways. Let me donate some.
Right. I was kind of thinking that as well too. It might be easier to give up a Bitcoin than, actual dollar amount.
Yeah, exactly. But there's also downsides to it because, even though people, would double check to see if the money's, being wired to the right account for a bank-to-bank transfer, with the crypto, it was scary. Like everybody triple checked, saying, is this actually the wallet for for Ukraine, or has this been hacked? Is this a real Twitter account? Has a Twitter account been hacked? And even then, it's so easy just to kind of change the address because there's some crazy thing and there's no names attached to it. Yep. And if you send it to the wrong address, then you can't get it back. There's no way to get it back. If you commit wire fraud and you pretend you're the government and you get a bunch of donations and you get caught, that money can be taken back. So yeah, there's pros and cons to crypto. I would say as far as having money in crypto for an emergency fund, I think it's a nice way to diversify. But I would definitely not have 100% of my money in crypto. There's zero chance. I think it's way too volatile. So the the store value aspect of it, it makes it a not good store of value if it's so volatile. It's like, imagine if your gold bricks would be worth, half or double, on a whim.
Totally. And I can attest to the scary situation when you're transferring Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrencies. I've moved some between other accounts, and I feel like you just got to cross your fingers and hope that you got those numbers copied and pasted correctly. Because if you get it wrong and it goes to someone else, it's just gone. It's not like you can just call the bank and be like, "Oh, sorry, I screwed up. Can you fix this for me?" It's gone. When it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah, absolutely. So, at the end of the day, even though it is a good concept and it's a good way to diversify, it's definitely not the only place I would keep it. I mean, honestly, I would not keep more than 25% of my savings in crypto, and even then that's a lot. Realistically, I'll probably keep 10%.
Totally. Let's get into if we're actually using a savings account. Maybe certain places where we can go to get a higher yield, because as we know, savings rates, at least in the United States, are just 0.01 or whatever they may be. They're nothing essentially, but there are a couple places to get a little bit higher yield on your savings rates. Yeah,
I mean, it was a good idea for a while to have these online only savings banks where they were paying, 2% or something that was kind of reasonable, especially because inflation wasn't that high, or maybe it was paying like 1.5%. Unfortunately, most of those have dropped their rates super low now. Like I remember when I started my Marcus account, it was 2.1%. What is it now? Do you know?
It's 0.5%. So it dropped 75% since then.
Yeah. And honestly, to me now, it's not even worth having any money in there for that amount, especially with the inflation today. So I keep, my main checking account is with Chase. My business one is with BofA. And then my kind of savings account is with Charles Schwab, which is where some of my stocks are as well. So I have them spread out a bit because I was living in Ukraine. I also had 2 Ukrainian bank accounts, and unfortunately, I had a bunch of cash in there. I had about $20,000 in there, which used to be worth $500,000 hryvnia, and now it's worth probably much less.
So, do you still have access to that though, or is it locked up? What's the status of that?
What's crazy is right before this call, I tried to log in to my account to transfer, at least convert some of the money into from hryvnia into US dollar. And I was locked out, and I needed 2-factor, like SMS verification. Mm-hmm. But it was to my Ukrainian number.
Of course.
And, yes. So actually, at this very second, I finally got it approved because I realized I have my Ukrainian SIM still as an eSIM. So right now, I am going to try to transfer 10,000. I'm going to convert $10,000 from hryvnia back to USD. I'm clicking. I have it on my app. I click continued. And it says, this exchange rate is changing. Please try again in 10 minutes. So let's try again.
Dropping 10% in 10 minutes. So
yeah.
It's going.
So it's a bit scary. So remind me in a few minutes. We'll try again.
Okay. I'll make a note here. I wanted to bring up a couple other things too. So I know we've talked a lot about like Dave Ramsey, and we had a couple of his people on the show before. He has a I guess his theory of your emergency fund is he's so anti-debt, where he said you should not have any debt at all. And, we tend to preach that here as well, too. But he says if you have debt, you should reduce your emergency fund to only $1,000 and use the rest of that money to pay off all your debt, or just keep working on paying your debt as much as you can. And he says until you've paid off your debt, minus your main home, that your emergency fund should only be at $1,000. What do you think of that?
I understand his logic, and it makes sense, because if you try to save up $24,000, like you're just going to dig yourself out a hole if you're paying interest otherwise, Mm-hmm. So it depends on what kind of debt it is. But, if you're paying, 5% interest somewhere else, it's really hard to dig yourself out of that hole trying to get to a nice buffer. You might as well pay off that debt, because that debt is going to be due in emergency anyways. So, you kind of screwed either way. So I do like that system.
That's a good point. You're still going to owe the debt no matter what happens in the end. I thought it'd be fun to kind of close out the show on some tips from you, Johnny, because you're Mr. Thrifty, we like to call you. But let's say you're living paycheck to paycheck. We tend to think, we're an investing podcast and everyone's, doing really well and successful. But a lot of people find the show because they aspire to be better with money and maybe they're not quite there yet. So let's say you're living paycheck to paycheck. You have zero emergency fund. What's some steps to kind of get that emergency fund started and maybe some expenses to kind of skip that maybe people are overlooking?
Yeah. I want to say that if it wasn't for me being thrifty, I would be screwed right now. I would be so screwed. So I'm so happy that I learned to live frugally because, even now I'm still okay. So these kind of, these tips I'm going to share with you guys, this could potentially save your life because you never know. If you ask, 100 homeless people, if they ever expected it, I'm sure, none of them, all of them would have said like, no, I had a job, I had a car, I had a normal life. And I just had, 2 or 3 unfortunate events pile up at the same time. And that's what screwed me. So my saving grace is my parents were broke when I grew up and they've always lived, we always lived frugally. So it was very easy for me to adjust that lifestyle. Even when I was making a lot of money, I was able to still, comfortably be frugal. And that's what allowed me to save all the cash that I did to put me in a comfortable spot, even though, I lost, my home and all, pretty much all my money that was there. So first thing to do is, if that $24,000 emergency fund sounds insane, the easiest way to cut that down is to lower your fixed expenses. So instead of paying $1,500 a month on rent or $2,000 a month on rent, until you can get to a point where you're very comfortable having that buffer, you just gotta suck it up a bit. Get a roommate, move into a smaller place. Change cities, change countries, move in with their parents. There's options. People say it's impossible. It's not. And every single person has an option. It may not be what we think we want, but the thing is, we can either be comfortable now and live the way we want to live now, which is probably above your means, to be honest, for most people, or you can just suck it up for a few years, or even just 1 or 2 years, and have that that comfort of knowing you'll be okay for the rest of your life. If you just make those sacrifices now.
Yeah. And it's totally amazing what even a year or 2 can do to your financial situation. I mean, I've been broker than broke before. And, if you really focus and you have goals and you really want to get it done, I think it's more of, you want to be financially independent. A lot of people say they do, but they really don't. I have some friends that, they're just buried in debt and they want to do this, they want to do that, but then they go on vacation or they sign up for the expensive gym that's $150 a month or things like that. And it's like, well, I guess you're not really taking this seriously. So maybe this whole situation right now with Ukraine and Russia, even though may not be hitting home where you are, I think seeing even you, Johnny, who is doing really well, and this was obviously a huge issue for you, and it's really taken a hit for you, but you're going to be okay. Maybe it's a wake up call for some people to really, really get on it and focus and have an emergency fund and get their finances in order.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can, just share quickly how I started my emergency fund, because in 2007, 2008, I had a pretty good job. I was working for Honeywell. I was making 50 grand a year, which back then is, was a ton of money. It's probably the equivalent of making at least 80 or 100 grand now. But I didn't have any savings. I think I was able to save up like $3,000 to go on vacations to Thailand, and I basically promptly spent all of it. But when I decided to make the move, I went back, sold my car, sold all my stuff, and it was crazy because all the money I had spent, buying like furniture, clothes, 2 cars, all this, cool stuff, all this luxury stuff living in LA. When I sold all of it, guess like, and this was, like years and years of like accumulation, right? Guess how much I was able to actually pocket and have in cash after selling everything I owned.
All right, I'm gonna say you told me the cars you had before, but even so,
I had I'll to the cars. I had a Lexus LS 400, and
I like those.
I had a Porsche Boxster.
So in today's car market, you would have done pretty well, but considering the time.
Yeah, but remember this. I also had and I didn't own the cars outright. I had loans on it.
Oh, okay. So that changes things. I'm going to say all in less than 10,000.
Yep. I had $8,000. And that was everything, like my whole life. I mean, you would think,
doesn't that depressing?
Oh, yeah. But I mean, here's what's really depressing is every single person listening to this, like if you add up how much money you've spent to buy those things and then how much you can actually get at like a garage sale for it, it'll either make you never want to buy anything ever again, or it'll just depress the crap out of you.
I agree. And the extra burden, I've gotten rid of a lot of stuff lately. I had a motorcycle, I had 2 cars. Now I just have 1 car I use for everything. It's maybe not as exciting, but it's only 1 insurance bill instead of 3, and it's just less maintenance, less hassle. I don't know. It's all that stuff for $8,000. Think of how much burden you were putting on yourself.
Yeah. Absolutely. It was so freeing. When I sold all that stuff and I moved to Thailand, I basically just had a suitcase for stuff. Even right now, I mean, I had up until last year, I was traveling as a minimalist. I just had like a 60-liter duffel bag and, just whatever I can carry with, on my back. This situation with, Russia invading Ukraine, it's forced me to leave all the things I bought in the last year. All the furniture I bought, the two beds, sofa, dining table, TVs, fridge, I couldn't carry any of that stuff, right? Even all the clothes I bought. So I went back to having the same 60-liter duffel bag, 1 pair of shoes, a couple shirts, my laptop, and, basically just whatever I can carry in this this little bag. And I want to say, it's being very freeing. I feel so comfortable just having less stuff again. I mean, sure, it'd be nice to have a second pair of shoes or a couple different shirts, but in reality, I really didn't need any of that stuff. It was comfort, it was nice to have, but especially in, this day and age where you can stay in a furnished apartment or Airbnb or something, you don't actually need to own anything anymore.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think that's a good spot to leave off on. Johnny, really appreciate you kind of putting a positive spin on what could be a really bad situation. I know you're a lot more fortunate than many people in Ukraine, but it's something that could have really ruined you. And it sounds like you're gonna make it out okay, even if potentially you don't have any homes to go back to when all this is settled. Yeah,
definitely. Still sucks, but I really want every single person listening to this to put yourself in a position where if something does happen, and knock on wood, right? It probably won't be Russia invading your country, hopefully not, but it could be, you get into a car accident, you get some kind of illness, someone in your family gets sick, anything could happen where every single person here, we're human, we're pretty fragile. Something can happen where you can't work for 6 months or a year or 2 years. And the very, very best thing to do is to have an emergency fund on the side. So even though it's exciting to invest in new projects or new funds or stocks, I remember the first time, I had 30 grand saved up. And I got so excited. I started asking people, what should I invest in? They said nothing. Just keep that money in cash and then make more. And I was so pissed. I was so angry when they said that, but it was actually the right advice.
Yeah, and it definitely paid off in the end. All right, a couple pieces of business to get to. In our Patreon, lots of exciting stuff happening. If you want to join, it's as low as $5 a month. You can go to patreon.com/investlikeaboss or just head to investlikeaboss.com. Click become a Patreon. Johnny, he's in Greece right now. He mentioned it earlier. He's definitely down to do meetups, dinners, whatever you guys want to do. He's got all the info posted in there. And Sam just helped close a deal with Cult Wines. We talked to them a few episodes back. I should look up that number, but they got a really cool deal right now. If you want to sign up and work with them, they're going to get you invites to tastings all over the world. Plus you get to save on management fees. If you want to check out Cult Wines, you can go back to episode 161 to learn more about that. And Johnny, it's almost that time of the year. Quarterly updates coming in a couple weeks. We'll post the info for that as well.
Yeah, definitely. You guys want to listen to this one because this one's going to have a lot of changes, at least on my side.
Definitely. And if you want the full quarterly update, those are usually our most popular episodes. Complete financial breakdown. Sam and Johnny are going to post screenshots of accounts. Obviously, Johnny's got some wild situations going on. He's going to share a lot about that. That'll be in Patreon as well. I think that's all I got for this episode, Johnny. This was really informative. And I think it's a good reminder, even if you have an emergency fund, to not get tempted like I do sometimes and go, why am I not investing that money right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's fun to think about the things you can do with that money, but it's better to set it and forget it. And hopefully not under your mattress and not in some foreign currency. So I hope every single person got a lot out of this, that you're actually going to take some action. Don't think just because, you live in the US that nothing bad can ever happen. It can happen to anyone, anywhere in the world. So make it a goal, set up your emergency fund, 6 months cash. And for this episode, take a screenshot, share it with a friend or a family member or someone who, that can benefit from this. I mean, just send them this message and say, hey, I'm curious, do you have a savings, emergency, savings set up? And start the conversation that way.
All right. Thank you, Johnny. Enjoy Greece and that warmer weather. We will talk to you bosses next week.
Thanks for listening to the Invest Like a Boss podcast. Join our mailing list at investlikeaboss.com to get exclusive access to our insider investment portfolios and our private members forum.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends and leave us a review in the iTunes store. It helps more than you know. See you guys next week.